Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Church of Los Alamos. I'm the Reverend John Cullinan, your minister here. As Unitarian Universalists, we affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of all people and gather together in a free and responsible search for truth and meaning. Whoever you are, whomever you love, wherever you are right now, here or watching from home, wherever you are on your life's journey, you are welcome into this community. I want to extend a special welcome this morning to any visitors and first-time guests we have among us. I invite you to join us all for coffee and conversation after the service in the fellowship hall off to the right here when you walk out the doors. I would love to introduce myself and answer any questions you might have about our community here. And now, please take a moment to get centered for worship. Feel yourself grounded where you sit. Breathe in, breathe out, and let us begin. Ancestors who spoke with bravest fire, lend us your senses, that we may know another world is on her way, breathed into life with our participation in her creation. Forebears who led the way where there was at first no way, lend us your persistence, your temerity, your assurance that the moral arc of the universe does indeed bend towards justice. Ones who went before us, sacrificing for a future not your own, help us to give of ourselves, that the common stones in our hands today might be cathedrals of compassion today, halls of restorative justice tomorrow, sheltering walls of beloved community the day after. It is Sunday morning, the day we gather. Let us be thankful and full of praise to be in the company of those who came before, yet are ever in our midst. Come, let us worship on this beautiful morning. Would you all please rise in body or spirit and join in our opening hymn, number 1051. Please remain standing and join in our affirmation. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve life in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow in harmony. Thus do we covenant with each and with all. Please be seated. A candle has been lit this morning for hope for the journey. For all our joys, all our sorrows, whether we share them aloud with one another or we hold them close and quiet in our hearts, let us be together now in a moment of silence. Eternal and beloved, gracious source of all life and all love, we come together this morning grateful for this time out of time which we have set apart so that we might become more fully present to ourselves, to each other, to our communities, to that which we call holy. May our joys be celebrated together, our wounds be healed together, our hearts be opened together. Let us give thanks today for the spirit of this community, for the hearts that beat within it, and the bonds which draw us into a circle of love and care. As we open our hearts, may we find new ways to make that circle ever wider, realizing that there is no one in all creation undeserving of a place in that circle. May we never forget that if we are worthy of our place in the web of all existence, then all are worthy. Let us seal the spirit of this community in our hearts, carrying it with us as a source of strength and a beacon of hope in the week to come. May we remain in one another's presence wherever we may go. All this we pray in the names of those known and unknown, present and absent, remembered and forgotten, in the names of all the helpers of humankind. Amen.
I would like to invite the young and young at heart to come forward for a Time for All Ages story message. Come on up, all you young and young at heart. Woo! Hey, guys. Hey. All right. So we're going to be talking about this thing called heritage today, which is kind of a big word, and it's hard to understand what that is. But I have this thing here that's going to help us maybe understand what that means. So what do you think that is? You can see it. It's a carrot. Yay. So heritage also, sometimes we can define it as our roots, right? So where does this carrot grow? In the ground. So it doesn't grow in a vine, right? It doesn't grow in a tree? No. Underwater? On the moon? No. Under the ground, right? Yeah? Right? So this is what we call, what do we call this? A root vegetable, right? Because it's actually a root, right? Right? The plant is on top, right? And it's green and pops out of the earth. But this is a root vegetable, right? And so the roots, right, hold plants safely and firmly in the ground. So why do we use the word roots to mean things like heritage, things that have been handed down to us, that have happened in the past? What do you think? Why do we use roots? Any ideas? Yeah. Say again. Anchors us. Yeah. Anchors us. Exactly. That's one reason. So, and we also use the word roots, right, to mean that we receive gifts, right, from the past, just like plants, right? And we receive gifts from our roots. So we receive, some of the gifts that we receive, right, are firmness and safety when we stay close to our roots, right? We don't flop around, so if we stay close to our roots, this doesn't really flop that much, right? So we don't flop around. But for us, our heritage or our roots give us gifts of wisdom and courage, right? Because we get a lot of lessons from people in our family that have gone before us. So when we pay attention to the roots that came before us, we can learn from past mistakes, right? We can learn from wisdom of those who came before us, both allow us to flourish and grow, and just like deep roots allow a plant to grow and flourish. So keeping our roots close gives us courage. Why? That's a good question. Why do you think? Why does it give us courage? What do you think? Help us grow healthy, right? Yeah, and they give us courage because our parents and people here in our church and UUs everywhere give us courage because they've gone before us and they live their lives and they have lessons to teach us and they've been courageous throughout their lives and they give that courage to us, exactly, and they help us be healthy and grow. Yeah, exactly. You're on it, Liam. Good job. And so if our grandparents or ancestors could deal with the challenges, right, that they went through, or our parents, so can we. So that gives us courage. We can do it too, right? Any hard times we face, they've faced hard times too. So staying close to our ancestors not only gives us courage, but allows us to hold on and resist all those stormy times in our lives. Just like these deep roots allows trees, right? If trees have deeper roots, they aren't as easily toppled over, right? So we got to stay close to our roots. And we're going to be talking about our Unitarian Universalist roots and heritage today and the gifts that gives us and the courage that gives us, right? So that's what we're going to talk about with Reverend John today. So remember your roots as you go out today and live your life, all right? And this week. So thank you for coming up. Do you want a carrot? Yeah, you want it? There you go. You got a carrot.
I'm going to let you in a little behind the scenes information about what goes into making church. I write the titles for these sermons a good 6 to 8 weeks before you see them published anywhere, before I even really have any kind of idea what the sermon is going to be about. I have the kernel of an idea, and usually by the end of it, by the time you hear it on a Sunday morning, it is something completely different from what I had planned. The idea was, with our month of October having the theme of heritage, was that I was going to pick up all the major important threads of our Unitarian and our Universalist history and weave them together in a way of naming what the gifts are that we have inherited as Unitarian Universalists today. And by 3 p.m. on Friday, I had what was probably going to be a 3-hour sermon, because that's a lot of history, folks. There's a lot that goes into making us who we are today. There is a lot that we have inherited, and I just can't make you sit here for that long this morning. So instead, I came in yesterday, and I thought to myself, well, what if we just picked one day out of our Unitarian and Universalist and Unitarian Universalist history, and see what the gifts are that we can weave together out of that. So let's take, say, October 1st. Seems like a pretty good day to look at. On October 1st, 1844, the new Meadville Seminary in Meadville, Pennsylvania, opened its doors to its students for the first time. It was built with the intention of training new ministers who would go and serve our Western churches, West being west of Pennsylvania at that point and kind of up to the edge of the Mississippi River. It was an alternative to Harvard, but still as scholarly and rigorous as Harvard's seminary was, teaching all of the academic rigor that a minister needed to know, catching up ministers with a liberal arts education if they hadn't had a chance to go to college previously, and sending them out to serve our Unitarian churches in the West, which, as I said, ended at about the Mississippi River, and then picked up again around Denver and made its way out to California. There was a whole section in the middle of the country in those Great Plains states that hadn't quite merited having a church planted there yet. The joke was, of course, that Unitarians waited until a town or a city had a library and an opera house, and then they knew it was time to go plant a church. But this does not mean that the people of the Plain States, the people in what we derisively call flyover country, did not have a chance to learn and grow into Unitarianism at the time. October 1st, 1852 marks the birth of Eleanor Gordon, a very important figure in our history, and if you haven't heard the name before, I'm not surprised. Eleanor Gordon, along with her childhood best friend, Mary Safford, were founders of what came to be known as the Iowa Sisterhood, a group of women who came into their own understanding of religion and a Unitarian religion influenced by family and roots in New England, and started to form churches in those states overlooked by the officialdom of Unitarianism at the time. Eleanor and Mary were, like I said, lifelong friends from childhood. Eleanor had attended a Presbyterian church and in Sunday school figured out pretty early on that there was nothing there for her. It wasn't stirring anything. They didn't like her asking questions. I think we've heard that story a couple of times in the last few weeks, no? Mary Safford wanted to be a preacher from about the age of 4, and stories relate that as a child she would stand on a tree stump in her backyard and preach to whoever was listening, be it family or creatures who happened to be wandering through the fields. They decided they were going to be lifelong business partners, that they would work together to open churches. And in Hamilton, Illinois, where they had grown up together, they organized a Unitarian church on their own, with Mary as the minister and Eleanor as the Sunday school teacher. And that's the partnership they had for a long time. They built the church into something huge, and they were recognized by folks in the Western Unitarian Conference as having some kind of a magic formula, some sort of success. Mary was officially ordained by the Iowa State Convention of Unitarians and was invited to become the minister of their church in, I didn't write it down in my notes. How about that? Humboldt, Iowa. Eleanor followed her to run the Sunday school again. And as Eleanor began to grow in her practice of her ministry of education, she started to be recognized as a minister as well and was called to her own churches. She served in Sioux City for a while and then called on her own into Iowa City as well. The women of the Iowa Sisterhood, about 25 of them or so, from about the years 1880 to 1930, opened up at least 18 churches in the Great Plains states during that time, many growing in ways much more successfully than some of the more established churches that surrounded them. They gathered together and taught one another and supported one another. They gathered in those of like minds and like hearts who felt a call that they needed to answer, that the regular institution of the time couldn't seem to find the wherewithal to agree with or support. And while they were welcomed by the immigrant populations of the communities that they served, they were still kind of held in suspect by the elites and the establishment. There's Eleanor, and there's Mary Safford. The reason the sisterhood was able to persist as long as it did, despite the disparaging of women in the ministry, in the institution, were for two reasons. One, nobody else really wanted to be a minister in the areas where they were gathering their churches together, so they were pretty much left alone. And two, the secretary of the Western Unitarian Conference, something of an independent organization, separate from the American Unitarian Association, although related at the time, the Western Unitarian Conference, led by a minister named Jenkins Lloyd Jones, gave them their full support, or at least Jones did. Jenkins Lloyd Jones had something of a similar story to the Eleanor Gordons and the Mary Saffords. He was rejected by the traditional Christians that his family tried to be a part of. They had grown up in the Welsh Unitarian Church and couldn't quite find a foothold. They were never accepted into full community into any of the Christian churches they tried to attend. Jones joined the army for the Civil War, fought in several battles, broke his foot in one of his last battles when a wagon ran over it, and walked with a cane for most of the rest of his life, and took on an attitude of pacifism for the remainder of his life after that. And after a lifetime of rejection in Christian communities, he decided, inspired by the Unitarianism of his own ancestors, that he was going to enter the Unitarian ministry. And he went where all Western Unitarians went to train for the ministry, to that Meadville seminary. He had never had a chance to go to college, so first they put him in their preparatory program, where they trained him in the liberal arts education he would need to be an academically rigorous minister. But unlike many of the men who entered Meadville at the time, Jenkins Lloyd Jones was not a city boy. He was a country boy. And while he was accepted at Meadville, he was a little bit looked at askance because he didn't have that elite, cosmopolitan upbringing that so many Unitarian ministers had. Jenkins Lloyd Jones was, I'm just going to call it, too progressive for his time. He accepted and actually supported women being in the ministry. They had to be in the ministry, according to him. There was no reason not to have them there, for they approached ministry, he thought, from a much more pastoral edge than an intellectual one, though they were not, as he would admit, devoid of intellectual rigor themselves. And like the women of the Iowa Sisterhood, because of the experience he had of the rejection by mainstream Christian churches, he sought after a religion that was something more than Christianity, not settled only in the Christian faith. And eventually this would bring him at odds with other members of that Western Unitarian Conference. There was a divide between those who thought that Unitarianism should and strictly be a liberal Christian faith rooted in Christianity, and the Unity School, as they came to call Jenkins Lloyd-Jones and his supporters, who believed in a religion that included but still somehow surpassed and embraced more than just the Christian faith, not to the exclusion of others. Try that. Okay. It's blinking and doing something weird here. Where was I? It came to a vote in the Western Unitarian Conference. Would Unitarianism in the West be a strictly Christian religion, or would it have this vision of something larger that Jenkins Lloyd-Jones and his followers proposed? Jones was joined by the women of the Iowa Sisterhood, who had been practicing a much broader sense of religion themselves and felt like they had more of a chance and more of a stake in a religion that didn't hold to the conventional ideas of Christianity that had kept them out of the ministry for so long. And so they joined with Jones and defeated the measure to name Christianity as the be-all and end-all of Unitarianism in the West. Rather tellingly, the president of Meadville at the time said that the Western Unitarian Conference had been ruined by a company of women, just to see the issue in sharp relief. What Jones sought and what the Iowa Sisterhood practiced was what he would call a religion of blessed humanity. Jesus wrote no creed, he wrote, appointed no bishop, organized no church, and taught no Trinity. Taking these away, you have, instead of Christianity, only a blessed humanity left. Reverence lies not in the acceptance of dogma bequeathed to you, but in the receptive spirit, the truth-seeking attitude. He found that religion is a verity best understood when least defined. What we will find in our search, he thought, is not creeds to protect, but deeds to accomplish. And he discovered, in ethics, all religions meet. At the turn of the century, all of this started to fade away. Eventually, the Western Unitarian Conference and the American Unitarian Association reconciled themselves and became partners. As the West grew and the towns where the sisterhood had founded their churches grew and the churches grew with them, all of a sudden the men who trained in ministry thought those posts were very attractive. And men were called into those pulpits. By about 1910, the sisterhood had dwindled, and there were only about 7 women left ordained in Unitarian ministry at the time. Eleanor Gordon and Mary Safford still served churches this whole time, but their focus started to shift towards women's suffrage as the church started to abandon them more and more. Meanwhile, the religion of blessed humanity that Jones proposed was overshadowed by a heavy swing back towards the intellectual religion and the rise of the humanists in the 1920s. The sisterhood all but disappeared. And it wouldn't be until the 1970s when we would see women ordained in any great numbers again in Unitarian Universalism. So today, when you walk into a Unitarian Universalist congregation, when you walk into Unitarian Universalism, you walk into a church where now 60% of our ministers are women. Today, you walk into a faith that is inclusive of Christianity, but not exclusively Christian. Today, you're served by ministers who are trained not just in the academic rigors, but in the pastoral skills necessary to be a fully rounded minister. It's tempting to stop right there, to say these are great gifts that were received over time. Good things came out of all of that. But it's a little easy sometimes to rest on our laurels, to rest in the triumph that we have inherited over time. It makes it easy for us to say sometimes, hey, thanks, your work is done. We are happy to accept what you have given us. But we know that's not the case. Life is a lot more complicated than that. Sometimes the gifts that we receive in our inheritance can come in the form of caveats as well. Jenkins Lloyd-Jones, for example, I mentioned he was too progressive for his time. Not many people around him accepted the vision of the world that he had, and he burned a lot of relationships behind him as he got older, towards the time he died, because his friends and his colleagues weren't latching on to his vision as wholeheartedly and as passionately as he would. And the thing is, he was right in the long run. Jenkins Lloyd-Jones was right about the need for women in ministry and the fact that they belong there. He was right about the richness of a faith that is not exclusionary in any way. And as a pacifist, he was right about the need for peace. Even though straight into World War I, he was reviled by many Unitarians who couldn't quite take that final step. He didn't live to see our faith tradition progress into accepting his ideals. And he died very lonely. The cutting edge of progress is still today hard for so many of us to grasp. Even among us stalwart Unitarian Universalists, we know progress isn't instant. We don't snap our fingers and make a better world. But unlike Jenkins Lloyd-Jones, and we can take this from the lesson of his life, this caveat, sometimes it's important to find the balance between being right and staying in relationship with those who haven't quite caught on to what you're trying to sell, to the vision you're trying to share. The point of progress, at least in our Unitarian Universalist faith, is to widen the circle of those we call beloved, to those we deem worthy of being inside the circle of beloved community. But the trip inside the circle isn't always easy. The Iowa Sisterhood were pioneers for women in ministry. They managed to join the circle of those who could be on the inside of ministry in Unitarianism. But while they joined, they still weren't necessarily welcomed. It was a constant struggle. It would be a whole century before we began to see the fruit of their pioneering arise again in the church before we started to see women ordained in great numbers again in our faith tradition. And even then, even when women were able to join the circle once again, they still had to struggle against the vestiges of sexism and sexual harassment. It wasn't easy. It was still a struggle. The only reasons that the Iowa sisterhood managed to survive as long as they did was, one, an acceptance of their sense of self and their sense of call that they could not ignore. A stubborn perseverance to answer that call that they wouldn't let anyone tell them they were not worthy of. And they were able to persist because one person inside the circle had the wherewithal to step out for a little bit and keep a door open and offer support and encouragement and resources so these women could answer their call. There are still people who struggle to get inside the circle we call beloved community. And we can see that struggle reflected through just the history of the answer to the question, who is a minister? Women couldn't be ministers until they found their way in. People of color in Unitarian and Universalism struggled to find their place in ministry. Gay and lesbian ministers struggled to find their way into acceptance. And even today, our trans ministers struggle to find acceptance in the churches they are called to serve and the faith that they feel compelled to follow. They join the circle, but sometimes the welcome lags behind. And that's the story of the tension we live with on a daily basis in our circles. We are caught in the tension of being called to widen that circle ever more and ever more, coupled with watching the circle change and change again as it grows. And the truth is, more human beings fear change than embrace it. And that's true inside the circle as well. So resistance to change and resistance to welcome is inevitable. It is a piece of our history in the past that we repeat. It is part of our inheritance too. But resistance is also futile, because eventually we catch on, even if it takes 100 years. We have inherited a church that aspires to a wide welcome. And we have inherited the stories of struggle that it takes to get there. And we have inherited the model of our forebears in all of their successes and in all of their mistakes too, and the warnings we learn from them. We have inherited the model of a stubborn perseverance in service of where the Spirit of life calls each of us, and the courage to be the insider who finds the wherewithal to step outside the circle, to offer that support and those resources. And from the mistakes of the past, we inherit a call to humility in the face of disagreement, to stay in relationship instead of burning them behind us when we don't quite see eye to eye. And we have inherited the strength to struggle for the reality of beloved community, for the widening and the widening still of that circle of beloved community into its next expansion and its next. October 1st, what a difference a day makes. May it be so. As we prepare to return to our everyday lives, it is time to give something of the gifts of this congregation back to the larger community we are part of. It is time for our offering. During the month of October, all cash and undesignated funds we receive will be given to our friends at Tewa Women United in support of their fundraising efforts for a new building to house their services for Native women in Rio Arriba. You may give through the plate this morning or through the Givelify app. The offering will now be accepted. May what you give bring you joy and into deeper relationship with this community. When we give, we say yes to something we value. With these gifts which we have freely given and gratefully received, we say yes to the values of our faith. May these gifts help us live and serve our faith within and beyond our church walls. We dedicate these gifts to the values and the vision we share. Important announcements and upcoming events can be found on the back page of your order of service, on our announcements email list, on our Facebook page, in our monthly newsletter, The Voice, but a few to highlight this morning. First up, you may have noticed I had to fill the chalice after the service started and get that lit. I occasionally have these moments. If you would like to help me with some backup on that, I'm trying to put together what I'm calling the chancel team, who will work alongside our worship committee to make sure that we have things properly set up and help me not have these embarrassing moments in the middle of service. If you would like to help out with setting the sanctuary up with our proper ventilation procedures and making sure the chancel is set up as well, and shutting things down at the end. Please have a chat with any of the members of our worship committee. Elisa Enriquez and Patrick Webb are here today, and I'm sure they would be happy to talk to you, and I can as well. We are still signing up for our new Soul Matters circles. We're adding 2 for this year, a Tuesday night group and a Thursday night group. If you are interested in taking part in small group ministry, in having a chance to practice some spiritual exercises and engage with questions rooted in the same themes that I preach on during the month and that our children are working with in religious education, please come and have a chat with me after service or send me an email later and let me know if you would like to participate. We're going to close the books on that after this week because we need to send the packets out and get started for this month. Our listening circles are still going on through the middle of this month. If you have not had a chance to participate yet, there is still time. If you talk with Jeff Franzak in the fellowship hall after the service, he can get you signed up for one of the remaining circles. We're hoping as many people can participate as possible so that we have as much feedback as possible to start making some plans and strategic guesses for how to revitalize the church in the coming years. Our first session of Inquirers class will take place at 11:45 right here after the service. I'll be leading a question and answer session with the minister as part 1 of this class for newcomers and even old-timers who want to learn more about what it means to be the member of a Unitarian Universalist congregation. Jack Schlachter will be here on October 9th to repeat the talk on Oppenheimer that he gave at the Sala Event Center during Oppenheimer Fest back in July. I did not note what time that was going to be. 7 p.m. on the 9th of October. Refreshments at 6:30. So please come and join us for that. It was a packed house at Sala, and not everybody who got to see it, wanted to see it, got to see it. So we're happy to be able to repeat that talk here. And finally, Peter Mulvey, singer-songwriter, returns for the first time since 2016 here to give us an evening concert. He's a great singer-songwriter. We've enjoyed his time here with us before, and we're grateful he's coming back again. That will be at 7 p.m. on Saturday the 14th. It'll be $20 at the door, and I hope you'll join us for a nice, fun, social evening of good music. And the following Saturday, as I mentioned last week, we will be ordaining Tina into the Unitarian Universalist ministry at 4 p.m. on that Saturday afternoon. Please do come for that. It is the congregations that ordain our ministers, and you are the congregation. So please be here to show her your support and your well wishes and help welcome her into fellowship as a minister. And now, would you all please rise once more in body or spirit and join in our closing hymn, number 187. Friends, may life bless us and keep us. May the light of life shine upon us and out from within us and be gracious to us and bring us peace. For this is the day. This is the one wild and precious life we are given. So let us all find a way to rejoice and be glad in it. Go in peace.